Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Today we have two guests. I know, two. That's how we doing it now. It's 2022, people. We have Jen Greenstreet, who is a writer, producer, director of a movie that I need you all to see. Movie documentary. It's incredible. It's called Just Like You, and it covers anxiety and depression. And then we have Hilaire Phillips, who is the CEO of the Pierson Project. And it's a nonprofit to bring awareness to people who are struggling with mental health, but specifically suicidality, as Hilaire has her son died by suicide at the age of 14. So welcome, Jen Greenstreet and Hilaire Phillips, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for having us, Leo.
I am excited to talk about this movie. Are you calling it a movie or documentary?
Both.
Both. Love it.
It's a movie. I call myself
that falls in the genre of documentary.
All right. I love it. So the reason why I love this is that first of all, let's talk about the title, Just Like You, Anxiety and Depression. And I love the title, first of all, because it's so funny that in a land of or a world of 6 billion people, we think that we're the only ones who are dealing with what we're dealing with, whether it's anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts. And this movie is a testament and a display of the idea that whether you are a sports journalist or a teenager, or no matter, if you're young, if you're old, if you're black or you're white, no matter what your background is, we all at some time, if for some of us, it could be all the time, are struggling with anxiety and depression. I'm sure the feedback that you've gotten from this has been incredible.
Yes, it has. It has. I was so shocked to learn when I began this project just how pervasive and dangerous these medical conditions are. The World Health Organization estimates that 500 million people live with anxiety disorder and depression all over the world. And that these conditions are a leading cause of death by suicide.
Yeah, most people who die by suicide have been living with depression or anxiety or some sort of mental illness they've decided. So it's one of those things that I think this movie does, or documentary does a great job of, is explaining that it is just, it's a mental illness is just like a physical illness, and that we need to treat it as such and understand it as such. And I think that's such a powerful message. And that's the one that I love, that really, I feel like it really got across in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It did. And, Jen, I know that you've, written, produced, directed a series of movies in this Just Like You, from burns, anxiety disorder, autism. What's been a driving factor for you with this movie in particular?
I'm so excited you asked that question, because I think it really illustrates that the stigma that surrounds these conditions, because I myself bought into what is creating the stigma and it kind of came to light when I had a conversation with a friend, and she said, "Hey, Jen, would you ever want to make a Just Like You film about anxiety and depression?" And my answer was, wow, that's a really interesting idea, but we usually make movies about medical conditions. Are those really medical? I didn't really understand or put them in the same category as I would cancer or, any other medical condition. So I realized in that moment that I had kind of bought into the ideas that created the stigma. So the impression that I had was how important it was to get this movie out there, because I knew I wasn't the only one that didn't understand the true nature of these conditions.
Yeah, I've shared with some of my friends my struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts, and they were, the ones who haven't experienced that are just like, I don't get it. And then a friend of mine just recently who experienced a bout of depression was like, now I understand, like how hard
Yeah.
it is to get out of bed, to brush your teeth, to take a shower, to change your clothes. Like you just feel like you have 1,000-pound blanket on top of you.
It,
Hmm.
I can attest to that. It does. Before my son died by suicide, I did not deal with depression. I had anxiety, but I didn't deal with depression. I definitely have since then, but watching your child go through this is really, it's tough, especially when you are in a world where so many people, even just 3 years ago, didn't understand it. There's so many more people speaking about it now, but I've said this many times that there's so much on social media these days and stuff that's out there. If people can say something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true when it comes to mental illness, depression, anxiety, OCD, any of those things. So really seeking out mental health professionals who know what they're talking about is important, because I remember my son getting upset at signs we'd see that said, choose happy, think positive. He's like, I wish I could, so, and I'm sure you've heard some of those, same kind of things yourself. It's easier for people to dismiss it because it's harder to really think about it. But that was our big struggle, was getting people to understand that, it wasn't that simple. He couldn't just get out of bed and go to school. There were lots of times we had that issue, and it was very difficult. They thought he just was being difficult, manipulative, difficult. And the movie addresses that a bit with Rashawn and Regina, his mother. When she says that, she thought he was being manipulative. And I think that's a perception we have of kids, especially. And then with girls, teen girls, a lot of times people think it's just drama and that they're making it up for attention. And I've heard that so many times. And I've had people who've said that about their own daughters. And it turns out they eventually realize it wasn't drama. It was actually this. And they're stunned because they didn't understand it. And now they do.
Are you talking about me, Hilaire?
No.
Well, it's true. That was my experience.
No, I mean, like in the sense that your daughter has tried to overdose and you're not paying attention. Like you're just like, you're just being drama. Okay. And no, your daughter didn't take 3 bottles of pills just to create drama. She's not okay. And she's screaming for help. And I feel like that's too many parents have ignored something so big. Like, had I found 3 bottles of pills and my son, passed out, I would have not closed the door and said that's drama. I would have called 911, I was informed by one of the mental health CEOs here in this area that I wasn't a normal parent. Like, they see a lot of parents who don't reach out the way we did. But I think it honestly wasn't me so much as it was my son being that driving force. So, he never gave up until the end when he couldn't manage it anymore. But he pushed that boundary to get the help and to speak out. So this movie is it's literally, I watch it. I'm the biggest fan, by the way, Jen. I'm the movie's biggest fan. And I'm claiming to be a movie star since I'm in it, just so you know. But I've watched this. I've shown it in the salon to clients, little clips here and there. I've had families go, we are going to watch this together as a family. I mean, when they watch some of it and see it, they're like, oh, that is an amazing way to explain that. I get it just from a short clip. And I'm like, this is such an important movie that I just urge everyone to, whether you have kids or not, anyone. I mean, this is just such an important movie to me. I think it's going to change and save lives. Jen says that too, but I mean, it's really true.
Yeah, Jen, it seems like the movies that and documentaries that you gravitate towards creating and writing and producing and directing are those that aim to unify us. I heard you in an interview talk about how movies are weapons for mass connection. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. I attended Sundance virtually this year. I did last year too. It was incredible. I was able to consume so much content over the course of a few days. And I got to watch a documentary. It's called Brainwashed. I highly recommend it, by the way. It talks about how most movies are shot through the male gaze, which I had no idea about that. But what they talk about is what a sacred act creating content, creating films, and also taking in films actually is. Because when I make a movie, I'm actually inviting myself into someone's mind and into their deep psyche. And when you're watching a movie, the content that you choose to consume, you're actually opening up your mind and inviting that content into your mind and your psyche. So I take that responsibility very seriously. And my background, actually, I started my professional career as a prosecuting attorney, and I practiced here in Kansas City, mostly prosecuting violent crimes. And so I know the power of story because my job was to tell stories in a courtroom, and how I told those stories, what was hanging in the balance was someone's life. So everyone asks me, how did you go from being an attorney to a filmmaker? And it's not as big a jump as you think, because when you're a trial lawyer, you're telling a persuasive way to a jury to get a specific outcome. As a filmmaker, I'm telling a story through my subjects to get to explore a specific topic. So it's not as different as just trying a case as a live show. And when you're taping a movie, you can call cut, which is very nice. I wish I could have called cut many times in the courtroom. But I think that my background in wanting to be of service and knowing the power of story has made me very mindful in the topics I choose to put out into the ether, and knowing that every story we tell has the potential to greatly impact a life. And I want to be very responsible in the stories I choose to tell.
Yeah, I don't know.
That.
Sorry, somebody has their notifications on that keeps.
Yeah,
dinging.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to turn it off.
There might be a do not disturb in there.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
What a proactive way to go about this, because I don't know what the numbers are, what the stats are, but I'm sure that there's a link between anxiety and depression and criminal activity.
Yes.
Hillary.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
There is. So we have a lot of people who are incarcerated that are living with a mental health condition, and that's addiction is part of a mental illness. People self-medicate. Again, I quote my son a lot, but he said, Cook County Jail is one of, if not the largest mental health care facility in the U.S. This is a jail in Chicago. It is one of the largest mental health care facilities because they have that many people who need mental health care. And it's not fun getting that in a jail situation. So if we can intervene and take care of things when people are younger and when they're kids, and we can save so many lives in so many different ways, from becoming destructive or, I have someone who'd come into the salon. She had been arrested. She was in jail for 3 years. It was her first time. She'd been caught with some drugs, was released 2 years ago, was on, I don't even know the words, which one it is, parole, probation, but she's on that now. And it was her first offense. And she was self-medicating because she lives with a mental health condition and the medicines she was taking weren't working. So she was literally, it's just like, there's got to be a better way. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that we have so many people are afraid of the medicines because of the warnings and the side effects. And I won't lie, my son's issue at the end was most likely due to a medication. And I've experienced that myself since then, where I've had the black box warnings from one, but I'm 51 and very well versed in mental health. So I was able to figure it out, I think, to some extent, and be able to get the help I needed. Whereas a younger kid or someone who didn't ever have that background is not going to be able to understand that and what that looks like. But yes, so many people with a mental health condition are in our prison system. And I feel like if we would be more, if we could get rid of that stigma and shame, we'd have more people getting the help they needed sooner, and that wouldn't happen. And there is a huge taboo about speaking about this as a Black male. And one of my good friends, he's a rapper named King ISO, who does live with the same things that my son, lived with. He raps about this, but it is taboo in that community. And he's, we've spent time talking about this, how it's just really difficult to get people to listen sometimes, and what that looks like. So he's also on that same mission to try to help change this, so people don't have to go and be punished for something they can't control.
Yeah, that's what's remarkable about the documentary. Also, is that you see so many different nationalities and races and faces. So you find you'll see people who look like you in this
Mm-hmm.
documentary, and so that you do feel less alone, and that you're not the only one who looks like you that is going through what you're going through. Hillary, you mentioned your medication may played a part in your son ending his life, and I have asthma, and I was just diagnosed like a year ago, and the doctor told me that one of my medications might cause suicidal thoughts, and I forgot about it, and I started taking this, and like I found myself crying 5 times a day, like wanting to bang my head up against the wall. And like a week into it, and I mean, I was like, I have suicidal thoughts, but this is like at 1,000. And then he was like, different. Oh yeah, your medication might be causing that. And I was like, what? And as soon as I got off, it went right. I had a normal level of suicidal thoughts.
If that makes and I understand what you mean. I mean, I do. I will say this, that for me, it was very insidious, and I didn't understand what was happening because I started having nightmares and bad dreams. And then the tears, like you were saying, I just would cry. And I finally I think I just had a complete meltdown one day. And I joke about being a movie star because I'm in this movie, Jen, but I do act every day. I pretend to be okay because I'm grieving. I'm going to miss my son for the rest of my life. So I put on this mask, this happy face. But I do cry every day because I miss him. But I know the difference between that normal feeling and what that medicine was giving me. And I still had to convince people, because I pretend so well, that I wasn't okay. So even the mental health professionals were like, but, it's the holidays. He just had his birthday. The anniversary's coming up. And I'm like, this isn't normal. And so, sometimes pretending to be okay is not so great, but I don't think we talk enough about what that side effect looks like in people. I don't think people understand what it feels like. So like you said, you just started crying more, and we're feeling those suicidal thoughts more often and figured it out. But how many people have we lost that didn't understand that that's what was happening? I feel like that's such an important topic too, but yeah, that's a really big one. And I thank you for sharing your story with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Hillary, you were talking about how she puts on a happy face. And that's something that I was also surprised to learn, that people living with anxiety disorder and depression, deep depression, could seem like so happy and highly functioning on the kids in our documentary are like, if you would just look at them as they present, it's hard to have like, oh, are they really even going through something? Because they're so highly functioning, and they just seem so together. They're amazing kids. So learning that was actually one of the coping mechanisms of life with anxiety disorder and depression, was putting on the happy face and being chatty and laughing. I kind of heard it and knew it intellectually, but kind of watching it play out when I got to know the kids and through the course of filming the documentary was pretty impactful and powerful, and an important message that comes through in the movie too.
And I think that's another part of the stigma we face a little bit, is that some of these kids, like you say, Jen, they do put on a happy face and they can go and function. Pierson was highly functional. I mean, he was very smart, so intelligent, but here was this kid at 13 standing on a stage in front of 1,000 people giving a speech at an international convention. Who would think that this is a kid with anxiety? Like, he's the one kid that, that was going to be in the movie that could handle being in front of a big crowd, without any issues. He thrived like that. But because he looked and could do these things that other kids, wouldn't have been able to do, he was dismissed a lot. Or his medical condition was dismissed a lot. Like, oh, he can manage that. He's fine. Not from doctors, but from, like educators and other people in our lives. They didn't really get it because he appeared okay. So that's part of the fight as a mom that I had, was fighting for people to believe him because he didn't look like it. So all those kids in the movie have had to, in some way, learn how to fight that pretending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jen, the fact that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the funding for this movie came from the community, right? Like,
yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? Because I think that speaks to the idea that more of us do want to learn and talk about it, and that we're not alone in this, or else the community, the people, would not have funded this. What was your pitch? What did you say to them? How did you get so many people on board?
No, Leo, we have been around for 15 years now. So, and I think, we have 12 films, and it is a testament to the idea that we want to know better and do better. I think in the entertainment industry, I feel like sometimes go for the low hanging fruits, what we want to veg out and watch after we've been working all day long. And that's great. And I definitely partake in that. But I think a lot of times we underestimate the thirst for knowledge and the want to understand our fellow human being, so we can be more compassionate and empathetic when things like this come, like anxiety disorder and Down syndrome. I think the great majority of people want to know better how to treat their fellow human being. And yes, that comes through. We have a yearly fundraiser for our events. It started out with a friend in the front yard of her house, very grassroots. And this last event, it was sold out, within weeks of us putting it out. And, we raised more money than we've ever raised before to make and distribute more films. And our pitch to people is, we want to create a kinder world through the power of film.
Yeah, the thing that I really love about this film is that what's the word for it? But it shows us how anxiety and sadness can actually act as tools, as weapons, as guideposts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part where it said that, when we experience anxiety, it allows us to consider multiple outcomes. And when we experience sadness, it reminds us to reach out. So we're finding the strength versus, looking at anxiety as, as all the negatives. There are upsides to our pain, our despair, our sadness, our anxiety.
Yes. Yeah. And I was reading, have you ever read the book, Yuval Harari's books?
Oh yeah. I love his books. Yes.
Yeah. So I was when I was writing the script, I was really into those books. And, what is the evolutionary purpose of anxiety and sadness? Because there has to be some purpose that this is hardwired into our DNA. And I explored that with Dr. Mathieu. And how he explained it is, we have the illustration of being in the jungle and running away from and being confronted with a tiger. So it's our anxiety that kicks in that saves our lives. If we don't have that anxiety, then we would, potentially be killed by the tiger. So yes, we need anxiety. And actually in our conversations with Dr. Mathieu, he told me that he treats patients for having too low of levels of anxiety. Like they don't have enough anxiety, which I was surprised by. And then I could not imagine when I was talking to Dr. Matu, like, what would be the evolutionary purpose of sadness? Like, is there any reason why we have to, like, please tell me there's a purpose for these emotions? And he's like, absolutely. And when he explained to me that it keeps us in relationships and reminds us what's important to us, it keeps us in our tribe, basically. It keeps us in community and helping each other and lifting each other up. Sadness does. And also, you know, just from a very primal perspective, a child crying. So when a baby needs its mother, the baby's body emits something that makes it cry. So the mother will go find it and take care of it. So it really, like, at a very foundational level, keeps the human race going. I love all that stuff because I'm such a nerd.
I actually, when you talk about, you know, what's the purpose of sadness, that actually, I love that you just shared that, because I haven't heard that one. I haven't heard you share that before. I really like that. I will.
Oh, it's actually part of the film, Hillary. Remember the baby?
How did I miss that?
Yeah, the animation.
The animation part. Okay, yes. Now I do.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I did watch it. I've watched it multiple times.
Did you watch it? No.
I did. My husband's the one who can't.
That's
really.
It. We're having a test after this.
It's hard for my husband to watch it. I won't lie. For him, it's very difficult. And I've had some other people that are close to us that have a hard time. You know, they're not. It's hard. But otherwise, I mean, it's been a great reception from people. I will say, I had to say this. You were talking about the books. And the last books I bought Pierson, we were at Costco, and he wanted Sapiens, and I think the second one's what, Homo Sapiens? What's the second book?
Homo, I think it's Deus.
Deus.
And then he has a third one.
Sapiens. Yeah. Well, I didn't, the third one I don't think was out yet, but he had the first two, and I bought those at Costco for Pierson, and he had started reading it. So my 8th grader was reading that book, which is, so when you mentioned that, I thought, how funny. No one ever talks about that. And yeah, that is so funny to me. There you go, Leo. We were talking about how he was a deep thinker. That's definitely.
Well, you know, and the reason why I said it, you know, in the beginning, that I want to come back to that is, you know, because I recognize that, like, I have books on Mao and Napoleon and all these other leaders. From dictators to our authoritarian, from Attila the Hun to Genghis Khan. And what I'm starting to realize is that when you become too aware of what's happening in the world, it can become overwhelming, because I'm assuming your son was also very empathic, and he just felt things so deeply. And so we have to, I recognize that I have to monitor what I take in, because I feel it deeply, and I feel it for a long time. And then it makes me walk the world like, how can you guys be so happy? Don't you know that, you know, this is happening and that's happening? And so I almost have to protect myself from myself, even though I love reading about that stuff. And I
totally
can imagine
understand.
For a kid, you wouldn't have those filters or that awareness of
I think that's
thing that
true.
you love affecting you in a way that it does.
I actually think that that's brilliant that you brought that up, because I think it's very true. He had a love for that stuff. He enjoyed watching the news. He watched documentaries, you know, a lot of documentaries with, like, civil rights and justice. You know, he understood how we finally got disability rights, because he also had Tourette syndrome. So he was covered under the Americans with Disability Act. And so we did talk about that. And he loved history, but he was also, like you said, very empathetic. And so I think that's, you know, when what's Aleppo? Who's the president of Syria? Like, he was, you know, like, don't you know there's genocide? You know, so he would be very passionate about all of that. And I agree with you. There were times where I'm like, let's watch a cartoon. Let's watch a happy, funny movie. And, you know, and he did that too. So, I mean, we did try to balance that out, but, I agree. You can get in your head too much with that and go down that rabbit hole, and it's hard to get out of it because you understand what's actually happening. And that's, I think I recognize that more now that he's gone, because I have to compartmentalize or disassociate from certain things because I know that it will like trigger more depression if I'm not careful and, that kind of thing. So I agree with you on that. I think that was a very important point, actually. Very helpful for people.
Jen, one of the powerful things in your movie, in this documentary also, is that, it covers cognitive behavioral therapy, so that, when we have these ideas about things that or beliefs that feel like facts, that we can kind of deconstruct them so it doesn't become overwhelming or we don't end up catastrophizing. Can you share some of that that stood out to you from the documentary?
Yeah, sure. Leo, I feel like a lot of documentaries, traditional documentaries, spend a lot of time on the problem. The great majority of the film is covering the problem. And there's not a ton of time spent. And I'm a huge fan of documentaries, by the way. I love documentaries. But just for this specific purpose, I really wanted to spend some real time on the solutions and lay them out in a pragmatic way that people could soak them up and take with them as a roadmap for life going forward, whether they lived with anxiety disorder and depression or they're lifting life up of those that live with anxiety disorder and depression. So I wanted to create like a toolbox with that. And so that was part of my interviewing of our subjects. What works for you when you're in the depths of your anxiety disorder and depression? How do you pull yourself out? So therapy was absolutely a huge part. And we wanted to cover also that not only is there a stigma that surrounds just, whether or not anxiety disorder and depression is a real medical condition, but there's also a stigma around the treatment of your anxiety disorder and depression. Oh, you go see a therapist. So,
yes.
So we wanted to address that head on. And Dr. Matu talks about it like, it's not a big deal. I'm like a coach for your brain. And instead of teaching you how to kick a soccer ball, I'm teaching you how to breathe deeply and do cognitive behavioral therapy. Or Abby Eden says that her antidepressant is running. And like, I've heard her voice in my head in my own life, when I'm feeling down. Oh, I'm going to go for a run or I'm going to exercise. That's absolutely how I lift myself up when I'm feeling down. And so we wanted to provide that full toolbox. Talking to your friends is a huge one. Going for a car ride with one of your friends. One of the girls talked about that, dancing, listening to music, volunteering your time, taking the attention off you. That's what Ryan Lefebvre talks about, taking the attention off of himself and putting it on something else. And in my presentation, I talk about, you guys were talking about taking so much in and being so empathetic and empathic, and it's hard to filter it. We are inundated with media from the moment we open our eyes in the morning until the second we close them at night. I feel like I am taking in content nonstop. And we used to say information is power, but now we have more information than we could ever take in millions of lifetimes in the palm of our hands. And I would argue that in today's day and age, focus is power. And yes. I tried to use our film as a way to focus people on content that would help them with their anxiety disorder and depression, or help support those that live with it, or just focus on kindness, or focus on gaining knowledge, just to focus the lens into something that is going to make people feel better and bring them together.
I just want to say that you just hit on something that I'm sure, Jen, that you'd heard, Pierson say, but he said that they don't have time for, kids these days. We don't have time for anything because we're constantly being bombarded by everything coming at us all at once because of social media, because of all of that. They don't have time to stop and focus, like she was saying. And it was something that, he was aware of. Like it's just constant. It's overwhelming that there's so much information coming at me through social media, through the phone, the notifications on your phone, anything. So yeah, that's actually, I like, getting that focus on there.
How did you two find each other?
Well, so
you want to tell the story?
I do. We actually, my son was a speaker at the Speak Up Walk, which is a nonprofit here in Kansas City as well for suicide prevention. And it is because Karen Arkin was also a part of this, her and her husband, Steve, both are neurologists, and they lost their son, Jason, a few years before we lost Pierson. But they had this walk. They'd asked Pierson to speak. And so he got up there and he spoke, but just like you had a table at this event. And so we went, they have an anti-bully pledge. We went and did that, took pictures, did all that good stuff. And he spoke. And then I think that's how we connected with Maria more, was through that. Maria Stonestreet, who's also a producer on the film. And the Arkins had got to know Pierson. And so he was a natural at being able to speak. He was allowed to speak about this. We had a safety net around him of healthcare professionals to make sure he had what he needed. But that is kind of how we got connected. And then we were invited to see the debut of the Just Like You Films Diabetes Type 1. We went to that event to watch that film. And that was kind of like, let me see how I feel. I want to make sure it'll be okay for you, kind of thing, with my son. And I was amazed because I hadn't seen any of the films before. I was amazed at the whole thing. It was she took an illness that we think that we know more about, diabetes. We hear about it more often, but seeing it from these children's perspectives, what it was like for them to live with it day in and day out, and how their friends would react, or teachers, or whomever. She really did such an amazing job of letting you really could feel what these children were feeling, and you understood their condition. What you thought you knew was not really what you knew, and it just really, it was so much what my kid was talking about. He was trying to, he was a kid talking about what it was like living with a mental health issue. And I just loved, I became a big fan immediately. Let's put it that way. But that's kind of how we met. And then Maria Stonestreet and my son became like BFFs. So that's how we met.
Wow. That's a beautiful, Jen, did you want to add to that?
Oh, I just said, I will never forget you guys walking up to our booth and just so excited to be there and so ready to support and we have this anti-bullying pledge, and I'd love to share it with you, Leo.
Please.
It's like, it's just some words we put together to just kind of say out loud that I'm choosing to focus on kindness, and I'm choosing to see the victim in every bully and the hero in every victim, kind of thing. And you guys were just amazing. You're such a bright light on that rainy day. And
you remember it raining. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Cause I was like, what was kind of, Maria really wanted us to go out there and do the booth. And that's kind of one of my least favorite parts of participating, just go stand in front of the booth. But I was like, okay, let's go do it. And then, it's always those things that you don't really want to do that turn out to be the most rewarding. And that's when I met Abby Eden too. Or I knew Abby Eden before because she covered our Down syndrome film. But
yeah, because she's the one that was introducing and interviewing Pierson during his speech. So yeah, that's when we met her as well.
What an amazing day that was.
Hilaire, early on, you mentioned that you had experienced anxiety, but hadn't experienced depression until your son had ended his life. How did anxiety feel to you different than depression?
Well, with anxiety, I definitely, how do I put that? With my depression, it was so overwhelming. It was, I had no desire to do anything. The anxiety is more like this energy in me that makes me, how do I put that? I can start like having a panic attack with the anxiety. I can have, this, where people will say, calm down. I'm like, I can't. Hang on a minute. I've got to get in my toolbox, for that. And so I was really good at helping him with the anxiety parts of things. It was the depression that was harder. So now I will say that the difference is that with depression, I feel like I can't do anything. I have no desire to do anything. I want to stay in bed all day. I want to do nothing. That's the biggest difference for me. The anxiety makes me, like, you can see my anxiety. It's like it's constantly moving, and the depression is not at all. That's the best way for me to describe that, I guess.
Love it. Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah.
One's moving, one's not. Absolutely. The heaviness of depression.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to get out of bed, and anxiety, you're just kind of running around, but with like no direction, and like you're under, you feel like you're under attack, but you're not under attack. And it's like, yeah, and you're sweating.
And your brain can trick you. Yes. And your brain can trick you. Jen just mentioned, about, our feelings when she was talking about some of the toolbox issues and the cognitive behavioral therapy. One of the things we say, feelings are not facts. Let's stop and let's, look at this. Feelings are not facts. So that was, that's a big one that was helpful. But again, the movies are for these kids. And sometimes these are concepts that for children, it's not as easy to grasp for them. So like being able to present it in a different way, especially the way she does with all these movies that she's made that are so fantastic and amazing. But, these kids have a friend. So in the movie, the kids that are there have, like, Dylan has his best friend that he can speak to. Everyone has a safe person they can talk to. And that's one of the things that I really liked, was that we need to make sure that there's that sense of community, that we have other people who also understand this and who it's safe to turn to if we're not okay, and who know how to help us. And that movie shows that there are those people, and you're not alone. And when you, as she says, with the Maya Angelou quote, when you know better, you do better. Because if you don't understand this, you can't really help the same way. So the fact that she has the kids and their friends and show them working together to help, it's such an important part of it. It's having people around you that understand what to do if you need help, how to help, all of that. So and the fact that she focuses on solutions and how to help when you are feeling this way, when you feel depressed or when you're feeling anxious, what are things you can do to help? And she's right. Most documentaries about a medical condition don't focus on the fixing part of it. So that's, this one definitely does. And it's a good, it's very powerful in that sense. And I know that my son watched something about, it was after Anthony Bourdain had passed away, and they had a town hall on CNN, I think it was, with Anderson Cooper, who lost his brother, I think when he was 23 or something. And he's Pierson. I'm quoting my son again. He still asks why every day. He doesn't know why, his brother had to leave, but, now he's lost his friend, and he had so many different people on that form. He had youth, he had women, he had Navy SEALs. My son said that what he got out of seeing just the little bit I let him watch was that he was not alone. He was not alone in this. He was not the only one fighting for people to understand it. And he was not the only one living with it. So this is all of these movies. Anyone who's living with Down syndrome, autism, a burn, cancer, they all can tell that they're not alone. And I think these movies help kids feel safer, more understood. And I think it just helps them feel more positive about their future. I think that they're just, like I said, I'm her biggest fan. So
yeah, Jen, it sounds like the movie also empowers parents to find a vocabulary to talk and share with their kids. I think a lot of when adults or parents are seem dismissive of their kids' emotions is because they don't have the vocabulary or the skills to even know how to help their kids unpack what they're experiencing and be able to sit with them. And it sounds like your movie is very empowering for parents. Have you gotten that feedback from parents?
Yeah, I have. And I, as a parent, learned so much and felt so empowered by it. with Regina talking about how at first she thought she didn't understand what Roshan was doing. She thought he was throwing a fit or he was being manipulative. And so, as a parent, you want to set your child up for success. And so when they exhibit those kinds of behaviors, you want to squash them as quickly as possible, or that's how I used to parent. And how I was raised, and I think my parents were doing the best they could, was you just suck it up and get it together. What's your problem? And that's how I was raising my children also. And what I noticed in my own parenting is that didn't quiet or stop the situation. It only inflamed it. And it became greater and greater until it was completely out of control. And when I started speaking with the kids and talking to Dr. Mathieu, and I think it was Morgan who said, the thing that my mom does for me that helps me the most is she sits on the bed with me and puts her hand on my back. And I'm like, what? Is it that simple? Is it really just that, like putting my hand on my kid's back, And so I tried it, and it was like magic. It was like magic. The energy came down, and I said, why don't I make us a hot cup of tea? The energy just further came down, and I felt, wow, I am actually really helping my child. Like I would treat her if she had the flu, or like I would treat her if she had an asthma attack. I wouldn't say, get it together. Why don't you just breathe? We got to go. You have this appointment. I would get her inhaler. I would call the doctor. I would tell her to lie down. And that's exactly how I learned that I need to parent when anxiety disorder and depression comes up. And I think Regina says it best. It makes me cry every time, because she was worried about getting Roshan help, which I think every parent has that worry, because it's going to create a record and it might impact their ability to go to a certain college or do a certain profession, because I think Roshan was looking into medicine. So she had a great fear around that. And so she was worried that by getting her child help, she'd be a bad parent. And I said, do you think that now? And she's like, no, Roshan tells me that I'm a good parent for getting him help. And
that makes me cry.
It makes me cry every time. And then I said, how does that make you? And she's like, it means the world to me.
I can't imagine feeling. I remember having people tell me, like, you better get him life insurance now, because as an adult, he will not be able to get it with this diagnosis, or he won't, people, even professionals were telling us, well, don't get him evaluated for this yet. The new DSM will be coming out, and it might be, people really did talk about that. So as a parent, I remember people saying things that, in different, like I said, life insurance, the fact that I was worried about my child becoming an adult and not being able to provide life insurance and get it, if he had a family, that was a real concern for me. It didn't stop me from getting him help, but I hadn't thought about, would he be able to go to school? Would he be able to get it, do the things he wanted to do in that sense? So,
well, could you imagine having a doctor that was living with anxiety disorder and depression? I mean, we want our professionals to help. Well, we want them to be able to get the help they need. That's the stigma. And that's what we believe, that by watching our film, it will help in that stigma.
Well, please, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of times, addiction specialists have been there. They understand it because they've been there, so they can help from a different perspective.
Right.
Whereas and therapists have to go to therapy. They are listening to a lot of trauma from people. But, I think there's something about, listening to the story of someone who's lived it is very important to understand exactly what it's like. Like, I can understand, I get messages from kids all the time who are struggling because they know that I will listen, because they saw that modeled with Pierson, I guess. And I do always reach out to somebody that knows who is this person, make sure they have help. I make sure that somebody is aware that's a professional and who the person is. But there's a lot of people that don't feel heard. And I'm hoping that that's what this movie will help. They can feel like they can be heard now. They have tools with which to say, no, I know that this is okay. And this is, what this is, and this is how I need to get help. And that's just it. It's like all these children and their friends and Regina and Ryan and Abby, everyone sharing those stories. other people realize they're not alone, and then they can actually have that tool saying, I can do this. And they can see Abby getting on the news, every day and being able to do her job. It doesn't mean you can't do things or be successful in life or lead a happy life. And Ryan, he's been announcing at the Royals for how many years? He's had, a successful life and career. Yes, they deal with anxiety or depression at times, but you can still function. I mean, it gave so much hope as well. I mean, the movie, it does all of it.
I love it. Just Like You, Anxiety and Depression. It's available on iTunes. Is it available anywhere else, Jen?
Yes. It's also available on Apple TV and Amazon Prime, and it's available on cable, on VOD on cable, many, many platforms. I can share them all with you.
Love it. And, the last question, I ask this of all my guests, because I always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of wanting to end their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them? Either one of you could answer that, or both of you can answer that.
Oh. I mean, I know what I would say. I do know what I would say. Oh gosh, and give me a minute, because that definitely takes me back to that night, because I was there. This is just a moment. This moment will pass. This is just a moment. And I'm here with you, and I will be here with you until the moment passes. That is what I would say. I mean, my son was very succinct in telling me that when he felt this way, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about his dad. And he couldn't think of us because the pain was so great. So I don't take it personally. It wasn't a choice. This was his illness. That's what he died from, was his illness. But that was one of the things that I know he couldn't, like, how much more do I have to bear? It will pass, I swear. It will pass, and we will get you the help that you need. That is what I would have, had I known what was going to happen. That's what I would have said.
Wow, Hilaire.
Well, I mean, and I was his biggest support. I mean, I was never not there. I was always there.
Yeah.
And looking back, I can see the signs that day wasn't normal, that there were things I don't understand. But he'd always asked for help, and he'd always been open with me and told me when he didn't feel safe, and we would take him. And things are very different now, though, too, with the system. They address suicidal issues differently now. The hospital that he would be inpatient in he was treated as a behavioral issue and not as someone who was suicidal. So they now have different programs for youth who are feeling this way. So much has changed in the last few years. And I'd like to think that he was part of that change in some way, but there's a lot more available now than there was even just 3 years ago. So, but it is a moment, and the moment will pass. We just have to get through this moment. And if anyone's feeling like that, they need to reach out for help, and not just on a phone, not just in a text. You need to physically be with somebody and talk to them, and tell them you need to be there until the moment passes. It will pass.
That's powerful.
I've never been asked that question.
I know that's an intense question, Leah.
No, it's a good question. That is a really good question to ask.
Yeah, it is. And I think my answer would be, if someone, to the question before you kill yourself, I would say, this is a medical condition. This is not your fault. And I want to do whatever I can to get you the help that you need. I would treat it not unlike someone who is having a life-threatening asthma attack, or had cancer that had progressed to the point where it was threatening their lives. And I would treat it like that kind of a medical emergency. And I would say to them, let me get you the medical help you need. I'm not equipped to provide. I can be here with you. I can speak with you while we get you to the people that can help you. But I would treat it like a medical emergency, because at the beginning of this project, I didn't think it was. And now I understand that it is.
It is a medical emergency. And I think that too many people are afraid to go and take that step and take a loved one to the hospital or to call 911 for a wellness check. There's so many things that happen when someone is at that point. And if they let you know, or if you suspect, there's a lot of self-harming that people will do, that kids, adults will do. That's a sign to pay attention to. But making that call and getting help is sometimes the hardest first step for people. And once you do that, it's much easier. Once you take that first step, it's easy. But yes, it is definitely a medical condition. I don't feel, and we've said this, just like cancer, it can kill. Unfortunately, it does. And it's not I don't feel like my son felt like he had a choice. This wasn't a choice for him. This was, I can't handle this anymore. It's too much. It hurts. It hurts too much. And I know that when I was having those issues with my medicine this last year, I felt like I felt like that was the only way to make it stop. I totally understand it now in a different way, but I think that's why it's so important to listen to kids. And like Jen said, I'm not equipped to help you, but I will get you the help. I will be here with you until we get that help.
Hilaire Phillips, Jen Greenstreet, thank you so much for joining me today. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you calling the 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALKS, or if you're international in Budapest or Israel or Toronto or Peru, wherever you are in the world, there are international suicide hotline phone numbers for you. You can call, you can text, you can chat. If you need medical assistance or financial assistance, there are also links in each and every single one of the show notes to help you with your financial assistance. You can always go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Hilaire.
Thank you, Leo. And thank you for doing this podcast. This is an incredible work.